Okay, great. Well, welcome. I'm excited about this conversation here. A big welcome to Daniel and Christian. I appreciate you guys joining me. We wanted to have a conversation about all things logistics related and all of the fun that brings with it. So, who better than to bring on some of the Logic-ology team here and dive into things. But To kick things off, for our federation, either members, brewery or winery, distillery, people who might want to check this out, or people from the beverage industry that are looking to, either solve some things or have had some pain points or planning for next year. I appreciate it. Welcome, guys. Welcome and glad we could have a conversation here.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan, for having us. We're definitely excited to have a chat here and to people in the beverage industry to learn about who is Logic-ology, what is Logic-ology, and how can we help members of the Beverage Federation and future members of the Beverage Federation. I would definitely like to start off by introducing myself.
Yes,
My name
please
is
do.
Daniel Doulov. I'm the business development manager here at Logic-ology. I help new members, current members of the Beverage Federation, learn more about Logic-ology and how our logistics services can help their current business. The beverage business is very production based, and it's very important to get just on time deliveries, face production schedule issues, and that's what we're here for. We're here to make life easier because logistics at the end of the day is what makes everything happen. So that's a little bit about myself. We'll get into it a lot more, but I'll throw it over to Christian to introduce himself.
That's good. Thanks, Dan. And Dan, thanks for having us. My name's Christian, Director of Operations with Logic-ology. So overseeing the day-to-day operations. Beverage is one of the larger commodities that we move day to day. All types of beverage, whether that's raw materials, finished goods, and all the everything in between, dunnage, and all the intricacies of logistics as a whole. So excited to have a conversation today.
Well, good. Chris and Daniel, I appreciate it for you guys coming to join it. Let's dive right into it. I'm curious from both your guys' perspective, on a given day, what is one of the biggest issues that you hear or as it relates to the beverage industry? I guess I start off with, when the phone rings and it's potentially a new brewery you're working with, a new distillery, someone's trying to move that beverage product. What is the biggest issue that you're hearing from that industry? And feel free if something comes to mind, if someone wants to dive into that one and take it. But I'm always curious of what's the biggest thing 9 times out of 10 when that phone rings.
I think I can definitely take it here. Whenever I get phone calls from either breweries or distilleries, suppliers of raw materials, or even on the finished goods side, everyone's always kind of last minute panic. Hey, I got a production run to do. I got a delivery to make. I got a PO to deliver. Everybody's always reaching out and wanting to get it done. And this is where, on the logistics side, we come in and we deliver the product, and not only in a timely manner, but in a cost-efficient manner. Because let's say the beverage industry, sometimes there's very tight margins. We all know there's tight margins on the final good costs. There's tight margins on everything related to there's the cost of your employees is going up, the cost of your building is going up, the cost of equipment, all these rising costs, and you need to be able to keep costs down some way. And this is where Logic-ology will come in, and on the logistics side, we look at those costs and we try to reduce them as much as possible. Christian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think from my end, I guess more on the operations day to day, what I see is, ultimately, hey, I got to get my product from point A to point B, but there's so many different things that you have to understand. When you talk about breweries or distilleries, right, that could be empty cans, it could be filled beer, it could be high level alcohol content, whatever type of product that you're moving. You got to understand things like, okay, is it a high level of alcohol concentration? Does that require, hazmat certification? Is it going through certain states that require permits? How is the freight being loaded? If it's a heavy nature being, filled beer, those are heavy pallets. How, are the shippers vetted and making sure that they're loading properly to avoid, shifting in transit? So, yeah, a lot of things I think day to day is just understanding all those challenges that can come forward. It's not just, hey, I got to move it from point A to point B. There's so many things that you got to understand, and making sure that, your network that you're using understands that as well and is set up to, ultimately for success.
Yeah. You mentioned something there, Christian, that I wonder, and I imagine, first year breweries, especially I think about, and first year of anybody in the beverage industry, it sounds like you guys are also doing a lot of education because, when I think about that call, that frantic call that you kind of mentioned, Daniel, of like, hey, I suddenly need this chemical and I need it yesterday. And you just mentioned some explanations of like, well, that's hazardous material, or have you thought about the fact that we've got to make sure that doesn't spill, or that it's got to go this way or that way. Do you find yourself having to walk through a little bit when you get that frantic email of explaining to maybe someone newer into the industry of, I can help, but I want to tell you a little bit about why we're going to have to do it differently because of an unawareness of all the logistics that goes into ship. It's not the same as sending that little box that you just dropped off and didn't care where it went when it got there, kind of thing.
Yeah, the best example I definitely always say is logistics is 100% of what we do, as a company. But from a brewery perspective, we might be dealing with a production manager. We might be dealing with a procurement guy for a bottle supplier company, their primary job is not logistics. Logistics might be 5 to 10% of what they might actually do in a given day. So our job is to not only educate the partner, but guide them in the right direction to make it the easiest way possible for them, and knowing and teaching them what they might not know. So
Yeah.
next time they can give the right information ahead of time. And not only that, but lead times are important. And I get it, not everybody always has lead times, but the more lead time so we can plan, obviously always the better.
How do you guys handle that? I find that there is a education process a lot with you're a small business owner, you're a medium-sized business owner, you're wearing a lot of hats. And I watch some of this communication. Sometimes it involves us, but sometimes I feel like we're CC'd on something and you're just kind of watching it. And where someone reaches out and said, hey, I need this by Friday, right? And so you have a problem. And I find myself, to resist the urge to say like, well, if you had called me last Friday, I could have done a lot. And this time, and then it's like, well, Carl, you've also called 3 times over the last week, and it's always a fire drill. What are some things you do from a logistics standpoint when you have either customers that just don't seem to be changing how they buy and starting to introduce lead times, or repeat offenders where you don't want to have to say no, but you have to, I would imagine, set expectations of that. I mean, how do you communicate that to a brewery who is operating their business in kind of a, short lead time, and obviously that's stressful for everybody. But anything from the industry, any tips, any things that you guys try to do, rather than, I mean, unless you do start out with the "I told you so." That's what I would want to say is like, Carl, we need more time. But any tips, anything that come to mind that start to, when you get that call and it's another fire drill, where do you start and where do you go with a customer like that?
I know in a day today we definitely live in a time with Amazon Prime and everyone's expecting, next day delivery. I want this done yesterday. We can understand that, we can understand those fire drills, and sometimes it's going to happen and it's kind of all hands on deck on our side to make it happen. Um, but yeah, there's costs associated. If you don't plan always ahead of time and you're always reacting and you're doing these frantic last minute trying to figure things out, ultimately your costs are going to rise, and any new business trying to succeed, if you're of high costs because you're constantly in a panic, on the logistics side, getting either materials or getting stuff out, you're not going to be making much money, and unfortunately at the end of the day that means your business is not going to grow. And yeah, that's what we find a lot. So the planning side, at the end of the day, will affect your bottom line too.
Yeah, I mean, supply chain logistics, it's obviously such a big part of getting, running the business as a whole, but getting your product to market. I mean, ultimately for us, we're an extension of your business. So as much as, we want to succeed, we want you to succeed, it's a partnership overall. So, I think it's important for us when we work with newer customers, being a realistic, for sure, educating them, guiding them as well. A lot of what we see as well, obviously being located in Canada, working with US-based customers who want to get their product into Canada. Part of that requires obviously customs clearance. So a lot of the education that we see is part of that as well. So yeah, I think education is a big thing. And again, setting both of us, whether it's for us and our customer, everyone for success.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that is a lot of that education. And you touched on something, Daniel. I'm wondering, it gets at something that, we talked a little bit about pain. I'm curious about misconceptions in your industry. And one that came to mind when you mentioned it is like Amazon. And I know myself that's probably has set this unrealistic bar that, like, for buying consumer things for your house, that like, hey, I'm out of this and I'll order it and it'll arrive tomorrow. And I don't think about, business to business always, like I'm putting on my business hat and then I'm thinking like, I don't need to order that till Thursday because I'll do it on Thursday and it'll get there Friday, because I don't realize I'm attaching an Amazon kind of mindset to that. But I'm wondering from both of you guys, what would you say are some of the misconceptions in the industry that you're already having to either correct, or maybe it's coming from internal things that you educate on, external things. But what are some misconceptions that you want to get out there, you want the beverage industry to know about when they're trying to tackle all things logistics?
I think you nailed it right on the head. Is a lot of people are so used to, again, the Amazon Prime model where it's business to consumer and get the product there right away. But when you're dealing with business to business, there's a lot more that comes into play getting product from point A to point B. Definitely businesses are continuously looking at, like, there's some different ways to provide supply chain improvements. But when you're doing with inventory, with distribution, there's a lot that we have to think about. Where is the product coming from? If you need some materials, the product coming from a warehouse down the street, is it coming from a different state? Can I realistically get it tomorrow? Can my supplier pull it from their warehouse tomorrow and get it to me? So that is definitely a misconception that a lot of people think when it comes to logistics. And honestly, problem solving and strategic planning is the top two things where logistics professionals like Christian and ourselves are ultimately here to provide that guidance for new time business owners and business owners that are looking to improve some processes. So
Yeah, I'll touch on technology after, but obviously it's
Yeah.
going to be a big part of, the industry as a whole going forward. But there's a lot of apps out there. There's a lot of sites that offer, ease of access, usage, things like automation. But I think at the end of the day, as Daniel mentioned, right, there's a lot of challenges day to day in logistics. And that's when I think ultimately you need to be working with the right people to solve those challenges. People that have that experience, that expertise. So yeah, I think sometimes automation, although it can seem as like, the best, I'm not saying it's not, but it's going to drive changes going forward. Yeah, again, working with the right people to solve those challenges day to day.
That makes sense. And as you guys were going through, and I was thinking about it from that early beverage producer stage, I sometimes refer to as the hair on fire stage, right? You're in the first few years, you're trying to figure it all out. You're making a lot of mistakes. I think you're sometimes in a consumer mindset. You're taking like everything from like you're not getting that into the business mindset. Do you get into an area where you are able to help let's say it's a small brewery, a small distillery, and say, Carl, I keep picking on Carl. You call every Friday with a fire drill. Here are some, either maybe it's, an Excel sheet, maybe it's a solution, maybe it's something another one of your customers do, or a process or an app or technology that can say like, we're going to help you set up what's a basic, supply chain communication. It sounds complicated, but let's just break it down to 3 steps. Like you're going to order things 10 days earlier than you're currently ordering, and that's going to give you the lead time, and that's going to help your cost. I mean, are you able to, besides kind of that, telling them it's more costly to wait to the last minute, things that you're able to do or provide or either in-house or recommendations as they're trying to create, in essence, their own, supply chain, right? Their own receiving and shipping and procurement, and on a very micro level. But I think sometimes it's just like, I think there's sometimes a lack of organization, or how do I get started? But does that come up, and is that something that you've been able to do to point them in the right direction sometimes, or to coach a little bit? Any tools that are part of that?
Christian, go ahead.
I think it kind of, I'll circle back to education that we mentioned before. Setting realistic expectations. I mean, yeah, lead time was discussed previously, and it's a big thing, right? I mean, what's the mode of transport that we're using? I mean, obviously we got to consider so many different factors, right? Where is it going? Is it in a different time of year? Are we going through weather delays? There's so many different factors. I think ultimately, communication, and then on the technology side of things, visibility, right? Obviously, customers want to know where their freight is in transit. They want to have that visibility. I know, like through Logic-ology, we do have that technology in-house. Basically, all of our freight is tracked by GPS, and customers can gain that visibility through communication. I mean, we've got our customer service team obviously reaching out 7 days a week, and that's a big part of getting the logistics provider as a whole. Again, visibility. communication ultimately, and circling back to things like cost savings and efficiency. So there's so many different factors. Daniel,
I think, yeah, I think definitely to add, good points, Christian. Definitely to add, I've dealt with multiple new breweries that are looking to start operations, and sat down with owners before and production managers and looked at their inventory. What did they need? Did they need malt? Did they need empty cans? Did they need what else do they need to bring in? Do they need hops? Like, what are they looking for from a material standpoint? How much are they looking to produce so they don't order too much and have too much inventory on hand and be paying extra storage fees if they're storing off site? So you got to look at some numbers, and you don't want to order too much, but you also don't want to order too little, because when you're ordering too little and you're trying to be that using that perfect amount of inventory up, you're often having to find situations where all of a sudden you're scrambling for an urgent pallet of, malt. Say you need more malt, you don't have enough for production, then that's where your costs go skyrocket, because you got to expedite that pallet delivery to your facility and buy it probably at an extra cost than you're used to. So definitely working with business owners and their production team, the head brewers and their production managers, on what they need for their business, and plan that way. So we can definitely do that. We can sit down, analyze the supply chain, and be those supply chain experts for anybody that's looking to join the Beverage Federation, or even just to start an own business. So
That's good. I mean, you kind of touched on it, both of you guys, and I think I get this sense sometimes from, when you're talking with those early beverage producers, that they don't have a playbook on the shelf, and they kind of want one, but it is that education of like, yours is different than the guys down the street, and it's going to take
exactly.
an explanation, education. I can explain to you why a shipment might be $200 in July for one thing, and then 6 months later, it's a different thing, way different thing, going somewhere different out in a different type of year, and why it's different, and going further. And I can walk you through that. And then you mentioned technology, and why, where that can come into play and support, and when things go, wrong. So I feel like it is that you're developing your supply chain logistic playbook for your brewery, for your distillery, but it will take probably some use case examples, probably some scenarios, and then as you get into year two, you'll start to have the outline of it, and then how do you improve upon it as you grow. But it's not it's not something that necessarily should be. Don't take the persons down the street and use that, because there's going to be a lot of variables, and it's going to take those conversations. So, the topics that, and a lot of times I do feel like it does start off with pain. So we talked about what are those misconceptions. What are some of the challenges right out of the gate that you guys hear? I'd like to go to the other end of the equation, end on a more positive note. Well, maybe it's positive. You tell me, are there some trends that you're seeing in the industry that you want the beverage community to be aware of? Hopefully I didn't tee you up for a lot of, doom and gloom. But nonetheless, for things that you're starting to see or on the horizon for 2025, or trends that you want people to be aware of, that in the industry as they're trying to tackle this for their small business, what's coming down the road?
Yeah, what's coming down the road? That's interesting. It's always hard to it's hard to predict. I think the beverage industry has changed so much over the years, with so much more competition. The craft brewery industry has seen a lot of competition. The seltzer, the RTD side of the business has seen so much more competition, where it used to be a couple of guys that are running it across the country. And now there's so much more players involved, and everyone's fighting for either shelf space or just trying to get consumers' attentions and why am I better than the next guy, you know? I think that's definitely an interesting piece of where 2025 is going to go. As for threads, you know, different trends in the industry, my apologies. What we are seeing definitely is a rise in transportation costs. There are several factors. I know everything around the world is getting more expensive, but there's several factors for sure that's starting to rise costs up. And just to make sure everyone's aware of, you know, fuel prices are going up. That's a big rising factor. There definitely been a driver shortages ever. I've been in logistics for almost 12 years now, and since I've started, there were talks about driver shortages going to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and we're already seeing that. So how do you, when there's shortages of drivers, how do you attract more drivers? Is higher wages. So you got to pay to get people to get behind the wheel and drive your product from point A to point B. Technology integration, that's the next interesting factor. Definitely, we see technology could either very much help a business or it can make things a little bit more complicated. Obviously, the best, we're always aiming for it to be a big help to the business, but if you're not using technology to its fullest potential, you might be paying for a service where you're only using 5 to 10%. And a lot of people think the new fancy platform is the best way to go. But if you're not utilizing it correctly, it's a cost. It's a sunk cost already. So that's where we're seeing a trend right now, in my opinion, for 2025. Again, the beverage industry, we are. We'll see what happens, but yeah.
Yeah. And well, a couple of things for that. You know, I'm glad you kind of mentioned it. And I think why I thought I was teeing you up for something is when I talk to people, I feel like they're having this still kind of post-COVID high that all of the logistics and supply chain from COVID that they felt very painfully. You know, I sometimes hear like, well, it's a lot better than it was a few years ago. So it seems like it's this, you know, that's still the comparison point. So, you know, it's good that you have options. You're not hearing, you know, 6 month lead time, or, you know, I can't, you know, someone just saying, no, I don't have, you know, well, XYZ. So I feel like there is that. But that's a good thing, I think, to point out, though, Daniel, that there's an explanation when someone gets a quote for something in April of next year and starts to think that feels higher, and where I'm sure that's hard to kind of try to educate and say, well, last April, you know, sometimes people don't have the time to or want the data points of like, you know, fuel prices went up 15%, you know, pay for cost, you know, for drivers across the, you know, in North America for transportation, you know, pay, you know, all of that factors into why it's not just our organization or that organization trying to make more money. It's an influence of, you know, the variables, just the same way that your beer costs at the tap room have gone up. You know, there's other factors. So I think it's important to educate, like say, this is coming and these are some of the factors to do that. One more reason to call you guys earlier and not make it a fire drill, right? So if that's going to be the case, give you an extra couple of weeks to do what you do. So
100%. The sooner we get chatting, the better.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, guys, here, and I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to the for the beverage industry about things to be aware of or trends, but I think you really kind of touched on, you know, a lot of good points for education, for communication, for, you know, technology, some of the trends that are coming, but some of the things that help solve their pain points. I think it was really good. I think people are trying to figure it out or improve upon it, right? So we got existing companies who are like, we can be better than last year, and those who are just in the middle of it and they really need some help with someone who can say, I worked with 3 people in the same boat last month, and we can point you in the right direction. So I think it was really good. Guys,
Good to
you know,
see you,
Christian
Dan.
and Daniel, very good to talk to you here. I wanted to make sure that how do people get a hold of you guys to ask some of those questions?
Yeah, thanks Dan for having us. We definitely enjoyed having this conversation. Looking to have definitely plenty more of these little chats in 2025 and giving people just different ideas, different tips and tricks for the logistics to help their business. Whether you're a beverage federation already member or a future considering maybe joining the beverage federation, the best way to get a hold of Logic-ology for anything logistics related, shipping related questions that you might have. You want to check out some pricing. What we do is we'll chat with you about your business. We'll understand what you guys are currently doing already for your shipping model. You know, who might be you already utilizing as a logistics partner, and we'll take a look at your supply chain from a shipping perspective, and we'll do a absolutely free analysis for you guys. We won't charge a dime, and at the end of the day, if we show that we're saving you money, great, by utilizing our services. If we're not, that means you're already doing a great job. So that's our biggest thing. Yeah, and you can reach us. The best way is to email us at Beverage Federation at logic-ology.com, and that's logic-ology.com. And I'm sure Dan will have that email address for you guys listed so you guys can contact us. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll do. We'll make sure that's in it as well. Christian, Daniel, good to talk to you guys as always, and appreciate all the good feedback on what you're seeing in the industry and being a resource. So thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate the time and having us on here.
Thank you, Dan.